Good evening and welcome. My name is Cal Harris, and this is my podcast. Tonight is episode 7, Bodiless Murder Cases, where we will go back in time to the first bodiless murder case and show you how the evidentiary laws have changed over the last quarter century, making it almost impossible to defend yourself if accused of this crime. We'll use my case as a classic example how the scales of justice have swung too far in one direction. If you have any questions or comments tonight, you can click on Say Something, which should be somewhere on your screen. It's right below the yellow Cal Harris podcast icon. And all you need to do is click on it and put your email address in. You're not signing up for anything. This is a YouTube thing. You won't be getting any junk emails from me. And you're not have to fill out any account information. You just simply put in your email address. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, it's free. And again, I think you just have to put in your email address without any other information. And again, you won't be getting any junk mail from me. So also, some of you have asked about Charlie. And Charlie is in the house tonight, and he will be making his first appearance on YouTube. I know he'll be here because I've got his favorite treats right here. So he's not far away, and he'll say hello later on in the episode. Okay, so let's get started. Bodiless murder cases date back to the late 1700s in England, where they were an accepted part of common law. Now, who was the King of England at that time? None other than King George III, who at age 22 ruled from 1760 to 1820. King George III is the great-great-grandfather of Queen Elizabeth II, who is celebrating her 70th year on the throne. The very first bodiless murder case was in 1792 in a case called The King versus Hindmarsh. Mr. Hindmarsh was a deckhand on a fishing ship who was having issues with the captain. A witness testified that Mr. Hindmarsh had told him that he wanted to kill the captain. Another witness testified that he saw Mr. Hindmarsh throw the captain's body overboard. Other evidence was some bloody clothing of Mr. Hindmarsh and a blood-stained wooden plank. During the trial, the defense argued there was no proof the captain was dead when thrown overboard, and if alive, he could have swam to safety or been picked up by another vessel. Since the captain nor his body were never seen again, the jury convicted Mr. Hindmarsh. 53 years later, New York State has its first bodiless murder case in 1845, with a case of the people of New York versus Ruloff. Now, even though you didn't need a body, you still had to have some direct evidence, an eyewitness or a confession. So the question is, how can you have a bodiless murder case without an actual eyewitness to the crime? I'll use the Ruloff case as an example. Ruloff was accused of murdering his wife and infant daughter. A neighbor saw Mrs. Ruloff and the daughter on the evening of June 24th, 1845, at their home across the street. They were never seen from again. The next day, Mr. Ruloff borrows a horse and wagon from another neighbor. And with the help from that neighbor, Mr. Ruloff loads the wagon with a large wooden box. He drives off and returns the next day with the wooden box. Mr. Ruloff was found to be in possession of his wife's wedding ring and clothing that she had been wearing the day before. With the 2 eyewitnesses and physical evidence, he was convicted of murdering his wife and infant child. However, that's not the end of Mr. Ruloff's story. In fact, I recommend you Google his story, and you can Google it on ithacavoice.com in the upper left-hand corner of this photo. Mr. Ruloff lived just outside of Ithaca, New York. Ithaca, New York is home to Cornell University and is at the southern end of Cayuga Lake, one of the largest of the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. Mr. Ruloff lived in Lansing, New York, and that's where his crime takes place. But there's much more to Mr. Ruloff, even after the murder of his wife and infant child. And it's an interesting story, and I think Ithaca Voice has a nice article on it, but there's also some other articles. Very interesting story in a very unique case. And Mr. Ruloff was a very, very bizarre individual. So at the end of the day, Mr. Ruloff gets convicted because of the 2 neighbors who were eyewitnesses and because of some of the physical evidence that he was found with. So he gets convicted. However, all of that changed 155 years later with a case of the people of New York versus Kimes in the year 2000. The Kimes were a mother and son duo called grifters, people who swindle and commit petty crimes. The Kimes were accused of killing an elderly woman by the name of Irene Silverman, a wealthy Manhattan socialite. This would be the first completely circumstantial murder case in New York. There was no body, no witnesses, and no confession. By coincidence, the Kimes were pulled over by the NYPD later in the day after they supposedly killed Miss Silverman on an unrelated warrant. What was found in the trunk of their car was 2 loaded handguns, a stun gun, plastic handcuffs, and the deed to Miss Silverman's multi-million-dollar Manhattan townhouse, with the Kimes' name forged on the deed. Miss Silverman's body was never found, and the Kimes were convicted of her murder. What this case did, and I'm not saying it wasn't justified, because it certainly sounds like it was, but it swings the scales of justice from one extreme to another. What happened with future bodiless cases, especially mine, is that you needed less and less actual evidence or direct evidence and more frivolous circumstantial evidence to convict. For example, in my case, one of the first things we argued in pre-trial hearings with the judge is that the district attorney, Gerald Keene, needed to identify what the cause of death was. What weapon was used, if any, and how was the body disposed of? The judge would not give us a ruling on these issues, leaving Gerald Keene a wide open canvas to paint whatever picture he wanted to the jury and leaving me no way to defend myself. In fact, it was so absurd that Gerald Keene argued to the jury that a lack of evidence is evidence that I committed this crime. Why? Because Cal Harris is just a bad guy. 99% of Gerald Keene's case against me was character assassination. The 1% physical evidence he had was the photographs taken inside my home. And as we saw in episode 3, these photographs were tampered with. Now, I've got this outtake video that I showed in episode 3, and I'm going to show it again real quick. It's less than a minute long for those of you who haven't seen episode 3 yet. And this is an outtake from 48 Hours. And this outtake, along with 5 or 6 other outtakes that are in episode 3, Erin Moriarty, who did she was the newscast. She was a journalist on this on my show. She had these outtakes, and she purposely never showed them. And these outtakes, like this one here, you'll see, prove my innocence. And she had them. She knew she had them. She never showed them. And she watched an innocent person go to prison, all for the money, all for the ratings. Or as what she told me when I questioned her about this, I don't agree with what we do on the show, but it pays the bills. That's what she said to my face. Okay, but at any rate, quick background. This outtake video is taken in Connecticut at Henry Lee's office. Henry Lee is the expert witness for Jerry Keene in my trial. And they're sitting in a conference room, and Henry Lee is there, Gerald Keene is there, Sue Mulvey, the lead investigator from Troop C, is there, her boss, Mark Lester, Captain Mark Lester, is there, and then the forensic tech, Steve Anderson, who took the photographs, is in this meeting as well. And what you're going to see is Jerry Keene say to Henry Lee early on, listen closely, and if you want to, turn your volume up just a little bit to make sure you can hear this video. But at the very beginning of the video, Jerry Keene says, these photographs are treated, quote, treated, and they've been altered, as he's showing Henry Lee these photographs. Sue Mulvey is sitting at the table. She can't believe that Jerry Keene just admitted this. She chimes in immediately and says, it's exposure correction, because she can't believe that Jerry Keene just admitted that they tampered with these photographs. Henry Lee chimes in, and he changes the terminology from treated and altered to enhanced, because he's trying to take the viewers, whoever's going to view this, away from what Jerry Keene said. And Henry Lee says, well, all you did was enhance these photographs. That's perfectly acceptable. That's not what happened. These weren't enhanced. They weren't exposure correction. What Sue Mulvey did and Jerry Keene did is they took these photographs to a professional who, just like Jerry Keene said, treated the sub-millimeter red stains on these photographs that were taken inside my home. And this professional made those sub-millimeter red stains brighter and more vibrant than they really were. Or, as Henry Lee testified to in my trial, these stains are vivid red, meaning, in Henry Lee's opinion, they're 2 to 3 days old or fresh. This is ultimately what gets me convicted. Now, here's the kicker. The original photographs are missing. Sue Mulvey doesn't know where they are. She just says, we can't find them. Now, this is a multi-million-dollar investigation and prosecution, a multi-million-dollar case that no stone was left unturned. No minute detail was left behind. Everything was documented right down to the very nitty-gritty stuff. And she loses the original photographs? There were dozens of photographs taken inside my home by Steve Anderson. They're all gone? There isn't 1 or 2 left? Not a chance. Now, one last thing before I show the video. Henry Lee is in on this scam. He's a hired gun. He's getting paid by Troop C, and he's getting paid by Jerry Keene, and he's going to say and do whatever they want. Now, as a expert witness, if Henry Lee knows that these photographs have been treated and altered, he should be asking for the originals, and he doesn't. He should be asking to see the original photograph and the altered ones to see what the difference is. And he never asks the entire time during this meeting. And this meeting was several hours. This outtake is just less than a minute. So I'm going to play it quick, talk about it for a second. I also want you to watch Sue Mulvey's face real close. She's panicking and she's lying about these photographs being exposure correction. She knows what's happening. Take a good look at her face. She's lying.
Treated them and
Exposure correction.
what did they do? So
Exposure
Correction.
They
they
Yeah.
corrected the
exposure.
exposure,
Yeah.
and it actually lightened it up to the point where you could see things in the that part of the photograph that
Sure.
you couldn't see before. Would those types of pictures be of any value to you, or once the picture has been altered, is it?
Well, you think defense going to definitely argue that, but on the other hand, image enhancement is a acceptable technique used. So you just say this is a image enhancement. You just the original image you just enhance. You are not alter the pattern. You just enhance the image. So that's the differences. If you start changing, say tracing, or changing the pattern, that become an issue. If you did not.
Okay. Now, did you hear Henry Lee say that all you've done is enhanced the original photographs, but yet he never asks to see the original photographs because he knows what's going on here. Both Sue Mulvey, who's in the picture, and Henry Lee are scrambling because they can't believe that Jerry Keene would be dumb enough to admit on video that they've tampered with these photographs. And so they're both trying to cover for him. Henry Lee says, well, all you did was enhance the originals, but he never asks for the originals because he knows they don't have them. Totally unbelievable. Okay, as a result of Gerald Keene not having to identify what weapon was used or how the body was disposed of, his expert witnesses never had to give a definitive opinion as to how the crime was committed. All they would say is that it could have been this, or it's consistent with this or that. They loved using the word consistent because it made them sound official without really saying anything at all. The other thing Gerald Keene did was bring up things that I supposedly did without offering any proof that it was true. For example, I had two 55-gallon garbage cans in the garage in my house back in 2001. In fact, these are the exact same garbage cans today. Commercial type drums with wheels on them. I also had a roll of garbage bag liners, 55-gallon, that I got from Sam's Club that were also in the garage back in 2001. And what Gerald Keene does is he brings one of these garbage bags into the courtroom and he starts waving it around in front of the jury, implying that this is how I disposed of Michele's body and never left a trace, offering no proof whatsoever that this was true. He then brings in my laptop and has a Troop C investigator testify that they forensically examined my laptop and get this, found no evidence that I was trying to locate Michele with it. All right? He brings in a Troop C investigator to testify that they forensically examined my laptop and they found no evidence that I was trying to locate Michele, which makes no sense. I don't even know how you would locate a missing person with a laptop back in 2001. I don't even know how you would do it today unless you had access to some law enforcement databases. But it was totally ridiculous because that's not what Troop C was looking for. They were looking to see if I had done any research, if I had Googled on the internet, any research on how to commit a crime like this. That's what they were looking for. And the bottom line is they bring my laptop in because they need to show the jury what was going on with my laptop. They needed to show the jury that had I been looking up something on the internet to commit a crime like this, the jury wanted to know what was going on. But because Troop C didn't find anything, they spin it. And this is what they did throughout. Just like the garbage cans and the garbage liners, they spin it. They can't find what they're looking for, so they have to spin it. And so now I'm guilty because I wasn't trying to locate Michele with my laptop because they didn't find anything. That's not what they were looking for. These are just two examples of what Gerald Keene did in the courtroom, implying to the jury that a lack of evidence is evidence that I committed this crime. And it's absolutely pathetic. And the scales of justice went too far the other way. Now, let's take a quick walk through their entire theory of how the crime took place at my house in September of 2001. And this kind of brings the whole thing together, full circle. You see what their theory is, and they find nothing. First of all, Michele leaves her boyfriend's apartment around 11 p.m. on the evening of September 11th, 2001. According to the boyfriend, Brian Early, who's pictured here in this photograph, Michele is heading home to our house, which is about 15 minutes away. Michele drives home into the garage, and in this photograph, it would have been the left-hand garage door. And she parks her van in the garage, and it would be right where this boat is sitting right now. Back in 2001, Michele would normally park her van right where the boat is now. She then supposedly walks into the kitchen area inside the home. And on this photograph, it's the door on the left. And supposedly she's standing in this entranceway here, this small, you can see how small it is. It's only about 3 feet wide. And she is supposedly standing in the middle of those 3 doors as she comes into the house from the garage. I'm supposedly laying in wait and attack her with a blunt instrument, hitting her on the head several times, cracking her skull and causing it to bleed. I then drag her back out to the garage where she's unconscious but still alive. And in this photograph, they're claiming that her body was lying on the garage floor right at the very bottom of this photograph, or just this side of the boat, or back in 2001 where Michele's van would normally be parked. Okay? I then supposedly put her in one of these 55-gallon garbage bag liners, clean up the crime scene so that there is no trace of evidence that a violent bludgeoning has just taken place, and then take her out somewhere on my property and bury her in a shallow grave. I did this all by myself in pitch black conditions with 4 young children sleeping in the house, ages 7, 6, 4, and 2. I did it all within a matter of a few hours, making no mistakes and leaving no trace evidence behind. Absolutely pitiful, and a classic example of how the scales of justice swung too far the other way in a completely circumstantial, bodiless murder case. On appeal, we argued to the appellate court that a lack of evidence cannot be evidence of a crime. If so, how can you possibly defend yourself? The scales of justice simply went too far in my case, and there needed to be a rebalancing of completely circumstantial evidentiary laws in bodiless murder cases going forward. As it stands right now, my case is the only completely circumstantial bodiless murder case that has ever ended with an acquittal in the history of New York State. And that took 4 trials, 2 convictions, multiple appeals, and 15 years to accomplish, demonstrating just how difficult, if not impossible, it is to defend yourself in a case like this. Okay, that concludes the podcast for now. If you have any questions, please ask them. Again, you can just click on Say Something, put in your email address, or you can sign up as a subscriber and you can join. I'm going to give you a few minutes to ask any questions. I'm going to put up my back page for a second to let you know how you can communicate with me and find out more about my case. I'm going to get Charlie around to get him over here, and then I'm just going to show this for a second, and then I'll be right back to answer your questions. I'll be right back. Okay. We had some problems last week. There was a snowstorm and there was a power outage. And so we had to redo this podcast again tonight. I sent out some notices that we would be having this tonight. So hopefully everybody got them. We got a comment from Michele. Michele, I know the Birnbaum case very well. And I'll briefly tell you about him. And Birnbaum was a doctor in New York City. This took place in New York City. And he is accused of murdering his wife. And in addition to being a doctor, he also had a pilot's license. And so basically what they surmised is that they've never found his wife's body, but she suddenly comes up missing, and they check his pattern of behavior for the few days before and days after the wife's disappearance. And they find that he rented a plane and flew out over the ocean several hours round trip and came back. And he had a big duffel bag. He was seen leaving their apartment complex or townhouse. There was some video of him carrying a big duffel bag. And because he's a surgeon, they surmised that he killed her in the apartment, cut her up into pieces, and put her in the duffel bag, and then loaded her in the plane, flew her out over the ocean, and dumped her body. The carpeting in their apartment had been taken up because it apparently had blood all over it. and he put in new carpeting and some other new stuff, and his behavior was just bizarre. But they finally had enough evidence on him, and he had no explanation as to why he chartered the plane to fly it out over the ocean the next day, and his story just fell apart. Birnbaum was actually at the Auburn Correctional Facility while I was there for a time. And then I lost track of him. I don't know where he got transferred, but he was at Auburn where I was for a period of time. Real interesting case. Also a case where there was no body, there was no eyewitness, other than the security camera, which was pretty damning for him. You know, he's seen carrying a big duffel bag out to his car, and then he goes to the airport, and you know, he can't explain where the duffel bag is, you know, anything like that. So, Michele, I'm glad you brought that case up. That's a good case, and I recommend anyone to Google that case as well, just like the Ruloff case. It's a pretty interesting case. There's actually a bunch of cases in New York. Like I said, I lost track, but I think there's, you know, maybe a dozen to 24 bodiless murder cases in New York, you know, going back to 1845, going back to Ruloff. And another case that was interesting that I had originally thought was the first bodiless murder case was a young college student that was enrolled in Rochester. And I don't know if he was enrolled at the University of Buffalo, but this goes back to the early 80s. And what happened with this young kid is he had a prostitute from the city, downtown city of Rochester, come back to his apartment, and something happened, and he killed her. And he went across the hallway to an empty apartment and put some of her clothing over there and her purse, which nobody knows why later on. And then it happened at night, and he takes her body out, puts it in the trunk of his car, and he drives her down the highway, whatever the main highway is, south of Rochester, heading south, due south. And he dumps her body somewhere along the highway there, down in the ravine, and her body's never found. So what this kid does, and now he's tweaking, right? He's committed this crime, and he's not sure what to do, and he's kind of freaking out. And so he drops out of school, and he goes to Utah, and he wants to become a Mormon. And this is a couple years later. He travels his way out to Utah, and I guess, like any religion, you've got to confess your sins. So he's out in Utah, and he confesses his sin to whoever is the head of the church out there for the Mormons, and thinking that he was confidential and it was safe, and it wasn't. You know, whoever was the head of the church called the law enforcement, the Rochester police, back in Rochester, New York, and they extradite this kid back. And even though this was several years later, he confesses to the crime, and to confirm that his confession is real, they went back to his apartment, and they went across the hallway to this empty apartment. And believe it or not, this woman's clothing was still there, and her purse was still there, and her identity was still there. Her driver's license was still there. And so that corroborated this young kid's confession. And so he got convicted. And I had thought at the time that that was the first case, and that started with a confession. But Kimes is, well, in all fairness, Kimes is truly the first completely circumstantial case like mine. And that case just opened up the floodgates for prosecutors and judges to allow anything in. And my case culminates at the very, very far end of that. And like I said in our appeal, you know, we're arguing that, you know, the scales of justice have just simply gone too far. You know, you can't say a lack of evidence is evidence and convict somebody. So Michaela, thank you. That's a good case, but there's more. You can look them up. Okay, Michaela. Yes, I'd love to tell you about Terry Schultz. Yes, I would. Terry Schultz had me arrested. Claims that I was stalking him in front of his house, which is not true. I actually have the video. I have my dash cam video, and I have my cell phone video to that. And I was up there on personal business. This came out before. I actually did a press conference about it. And I was in the street, a public street, public property. But make a long story short, the district attorney, this happened up in Oneonta, New York, where Terry Schultz lives. And if you go to my website, I talk about this and I show a little bit of the video on my website at www.tiogacountywoodchucks.com. You'll see a picture of Terry Schultz. You'll see the video, brief video I showed. And the district attorney did not want to prosecute this case. This was a simple thing, and it took over a year to get resolved. And so the district attorney, he knew what was going on. He knew that Terry Schultz was playing games. And so ultimately, to prevent this thing to go to trial, because Terry Schultz was not going to back off. You know, he thought he had something here and he really didn't. So we settled, and the DA was really good to me. And he offered me an Alford plea, which is a plea to a lesser charge without admitting that I had any wrongdoing whatsoever, just to dismiss the case and get it off the docket. And so that's what happened. And from that incident, I haven't had any more with Troop C because they know that I've got a dash cam in my car everywhere I go. They know I've got my cell phone with me, and they know that I've got a social media platform now. I've got my Facebook page, which I have a great following there. I'm very, very appreciative. I've got the max you can have on Facebook, which is 5,000 people. I've got my Twitter account. I've got my website, and now I've got the podcast. And Troop C knows that if they're going to try to pull something with me, I'm going to get them on video one way or the other, and I'm going to expose them. So, Michaela, I'm glad you asked that question. Since that Terry Schultz incident, and that happened back in 2016, I think they understand that, they're not going to bully me anymore. They bullied me for 15 years. I got acquitted on May 24th of 2016. This incident happened about a month or so later, and I'm not taking any more crap from these guys. I'm suing them. They know they're in trouble, and I don't think they want any more incidents prior to my lawsuit. So good question, and I'm glad you asked it. If you have any more questions, I'm going to stay. I'm going to bring Charlie in right now. And for those of you who asked about Charlie, I'm going to turn the light on here so you can get a better view of him. If you have more questions, keep asking. Charlie, let me get this camera. Charlie, come here. Charlie, come here. Come here, Charlie. Charlie. Charlie, where are you? There he is. Charlie, come here. Sit. Sit. Good boy. This is Charlie. Charlie and I are in a good place right now. We've got each other down. We know each other's personalities and our quirks. And Charlie will be 3 at the end of June this year. And he is my therapy dog. He is my co-pilot. And we spend every day together. And we're best buddies. Charlie, I believe that Charlie's got some thick fur in him. And I believe that he is part Chesapeake Bay Retriever. He's got a square head. He's an English lab. He's got that square, blocky head, and he's a little short and stocky. like a Chesapeake Bay Retriever. And we go for walks every day. He loves to swim. We go down to the creek here in town. And I don't hunt with Charlie. I'm not a big hunter. But, you know, he's a water dog. He's a hunter. And he does chase squirrels and rabbits and deer once in a while. And when he's swimming, he'll chase the geese and the ducks and whatever else. But if you want to see more about Charlie, I love taking videos of Charlie and my other, I call them grandkids. I watch my 3 other grandkids during the day. And you'll see us around town. If you live in Owego, you'll see us around town. We make the rounds and we go for a walk every day. And these guys really get along. But go to my Facebook page, Cal Harris Facebook page, and you'll see a bunch of videos of these guys. And they're really a cast of characters. They've all got great personalities. They all get along. They're all males. I've got Charlie here. And then there's 2 chocolate labs that are one is my daughter's and one is my son. And then we got a new addition, a little corgi, and he's the wild one. But yeah, these guys have been really, really good for me, and I enjoy having them around. But Charlie is a character, huh, Charlie? You want to come up here and say hi? Want to come up here and say hi? Yeah, all he wants is treats. I spoiled him. Go to my Facebook page if you want to see more videos on Charlie and the gang. There's some pretty good ones there. They're pretty animated. Okay, Michele, how do you feel about Paul Klein, Albany County DA, who kept hanging around to prosecute your case? You know, Paul Klein was an amateur. Apparently, his dad was a big wig up there. You know, he was the district attorney up in Albany, or he might have been a appellate judge or something. And Paul Klein was kind of riding on his coattails. Paul Klein ran for the DA's position in Albany, and he didn't even come close. He was really arrogant and cocky. He really didn't contribute much. You know, I'm glad you asked this, Michele. I don't talk about this much, and I probably should. Gerald Keene had no clue on how to prosecute this case. And this case was driven by Sue Mulvey, 110%. In fact, Jerry Keene didn't want to prosecute this case. He wanted to get more evidence that Sue Mulvey couldn't provide for him. And we actually have emails now that after I filed my civil suit a couple of years ago, we're now getting discovery material from the civil suit. And we've actually got emails between Sue Mulvey and Jerry Keene. We got these emails, and where Sue Mulvey's threatening him that if you don't prosecute this case, we'll do it on our own. Now, I don't know how that works, but apparently Troop C has their own attorney, that Sue Mulvey thought she could use their attorney to act as a district attorney or a prosecutor. But Sue Mulvey, because I fired her father, and if any of you haven't watched the previous episodes, watch episode 3. I walk you through it. This whole case was driven by Sue Mulvey and the fact that I fired her father, John Andrews, and she was not giving up. So Gerald Keene had no clue. They literally flew Jerry Keene across the country to meet with other prosecutors who had done bodiless murder cases because he had no clue. And Sue Mulvey did all the work. All Jerry Keene really did was read from a script. That's it. And as you see in these videos, the one I just showed tonight, he's not that bright. For him to admit on camera that they've tampered with the key evidence in their case and then not have any clue, and Sue Mulvey's panicking, she chimes in, and then Henry Lee's trying to cover for him. The guy's really pathetic. Paul Klein wasn't much better. Paul Klein he's a JVer. He's not on the varsity, and he was just a real arrogant guy. But Michele, I'm glad you brought him up too. I'm glad you're asking some good questions. Yeah, Yep, black labs are smart, and Charlie is he's smart. He's a goofball though. He really is. Thank God I'm not using him for hunting because he's a goofball. But I love him, and I enjoy every minute with him. Michele, do you think Sue Mulvey knew you were innocent from the beginning? No. She found it out the hard way, but she thought I was guilty, and then she wanted to believe that I was guilty, to the exception of the other suspects, mainly Stacey Stewart and Chris Thomason. And what Sue Mulvey did is she was coming after me, come hell or high water. She was coming after me no matter what. She thought I did it originally. That's why she poured so much money into this investigation. No expense was spared. And if you haven't seen episode 2, the investigation, I walked through everything she did and all the resources that she used. She spent millions and millions of your tax dollars on this investigation. And then she realized she made a mistake, and she doubled down and she tripled down and just kept throwing more good money after bad, because she couldn't go back. It was too late. So definitely think she felt I was innocent from the beginning, and she was hoping that she was going to find whatever she was looking for. She didn't find it, and things got nasty, real nasty after that. They started going after my kids, as I told you in episode 2, the investigation. She did everything she could to try to get under my skin. And at the end of the day, I don't know what she was trying to accomplish. What did she think I was going to do? Confess to something I didn't do, or, take them to where the body, I don't know what she was trying to accomplish, but man, she dirty, real dirty. And as I told you in the previous episodes, this isn't the first time she's done this. She coerced a false confession out of a 15-year-old boy that sent that boy to prison. And she's a sick individual. This isn't her first rodeo. My case isn't her first rodeo, but I'm happy for the participation tonight. I appreciate you guys asking questions. This is what I was looking to do. Future episodes, I am looking to interview people that have been wronged by the criminal justice system. I've spoken to an individual locally who's from Binghamton, and I'm waiting to hook up with him. He has a story to tell. He's also got a story to tell about his younger brother who's incarcerated right now, and just typical situation that I've been talking about right along. So I'm looking to line up individuals to interview, and we're working on that. I'm not sure when the next podcast will be, but for right now, we've got 7 episodes, and until I get some new material, that'll probably be it for a little bit. But at any rate, Michele, you mentioned religion today, and in another podcast talked about what happens when we die, and I was curious if you have any religious beliefs. Michele, I do have religious beliefs, but I have questions, and I always have had questions. I was baptized a Methodist by my mom and dad. They were Methodist, and then after Michele disappeared, my kids were baptized as Catholic right here in Owego at St. Patrick's Church. And so for them, I converted to be Catholic. And I do have beliefs. I do have questions, though. And I hope that there is a heaven. And I hope that that's where we're all going to go someday and be with our loved ones. My mom passed away in March of 2001, of all things, if you can imagine. And then 6 months later, Michele goes missing. But my mom passed away in March of 2001. My dad's still alive. He just turned 96 today. And and so my questions, Michaela, is there really a God? Is there really a heaven? And those are my questions. And I watch a lot of science movies, about how the universe was made and the theory, the Big Bang theory, and I watch those. So I have questions. I believe at the end of the day that the Bible is a good tool to keep law and order and to and live a good, healthy life, even though we're all sinners, and I'm certainly one of them. I've certainly made some mistakes in my day, and I'm not perfect, and I've said that before. I said that in episode 1. I take my fair share of the blame for the divorce between Michele and I, and I said I'm not going to discuss our divorce. She's not here to defend herself, and I'm certainly not going to sit here and give my side of the story. So, but I believe the Bible is a good tool, and I want to believe that. And I've read the Bible. I read the Bible when I was in prison. I read it several times, actually, cover to cover. And I think there's a lot of benefit to what the Bible has to offer. But I just have questions. I can't help myself. I want to believe that I will go to heaven and be with my mom and dad and whoever else, my other family and friends. And then I hope someday that my kids and I will be together, when the time comes. So I hope I answered your question, Michaela. I'll hang around a little bit more. Make sure that everyone's got their questions in, if they have any. I know that there's a time delay between when you type the question in and when it actually gets to me. So, great, Michaela. I'm glad that I answered your questions, and I really do appreciate the questions and the interaction. I thank you for watching and your participation tonight. Like I said, I don't really have another episode set up. I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to. I really want to start interviewing people and getting them on and to tell their story, and then show what I feel are the problems with our criminal justice system, having gone through it myself. And like I said before in previous episodes, I blame both the Republicans and the Democrats for policies that are reactive and not proactive. And nothing's changed in the last 60 years when you look at criminal justice reform. And I have an idea. I expressed that in my last episode. And this individual that I want to interview, it's in Binghamton. His story is exactly on point with a message I'm trying to get out. And his younger brother is incarcerated right now, and I want to try to help these guys out. And so you may not see a podcast for a little bit, but we're definitely not done here. There's a lot of work to be done. Actually, the work really starts getting done now. I've told my story. It's out there. Everybody knows what the background is if they watched the episodes, and I just wanted to let everybody know what my case is. So going forward, when I talk about somebody else's case, I have a pretty good idea what's going on. But I'll wait a few more minutes. If that's the end of the questions, great. I'll wait a few more just to make sure that we got everybody. And again, I really appreciate everyone viewing, and please share and spread the word. I think we're going to do good things here, and hopefully we get enough people, we'll make change. So, Michaela, if you could go any place in the world, where would you go? Well, if I wanted to just go on a vacation, the pyramids in Egypt are on my bucket list. I am fascinated by the Egyptian culture and the pyramids and what they were able to accomplish. So that's definitely on my bucket list. If I wanted to go, if I wanted to live someplace else, I'd like to go out west. I would like to go to Wyoming or Montana. I don't know if any of you have been watching the series Yellowstone the last couple of years, but we've been watching that series, and I don't know. I like out west. I like the scenery. I like the mountains and the. I just like everything about it, and that's where I would go. Michaela, good question. um, so, um, so his Donald Trump's presidency, his policies towards criminal justice reform were also reactive, but for his presidency, it was more about the border and the conflict of what's the right policy at the border. And we are a country of law. I do believe that we need to enforce those laws. But my problem with the Republicans is that because I was in prison and because I listened to the inmates in prison and what they're telling, what I overheard, they didn't have any discussions with me because I wasn't asking, I didn't want to know, but I listened a lot when I was there. And their conversations, the Republicans, mass incarceration and stop and frisk and broken window theory, that doesn't solve the problem. And it hasn't solved the problem. You can build all the prisons you want to. You're never going to incarcerate all of these crimes that are being committed. They're never going to go away by mass incarceration. And like I mentioned in my last podcast, what we need to do, in my opinion, what we need to do in these inner cities is the root cause of violent crime, in my opinion, and others, is drugs. And it's not guns. Guns are a byproduct of the drug trade. And so we need to get rid of the drugs and we need to replace it with something that everybody in these inner city neighborhoods can share in. And I use the reference of the Native American reservation. And I don't mean that in any other way other than economically, okay? I'm not saying that we isolate these inner cities like a reservation. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying economically, we've got to give them a certain status, a special status where they can create jobs and everyone participate and everyone has ownership. And I think we're better off giving them decision-making powers of what happens in their own neighborhoods and how that they can create jobs themselves. You're not going to bring a Walmart or a Sam's Club or a Target or a Costco. You're not going to bring a big company like that into an inner city and have it work. It's just not going to work. The things that are needed in the inner cities right now, if you talk to people of color, is access to healthy foods. That's the first thing. Fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. And you're not going to get any outsiders to come in and invest in these inner cities, to open up a store, and then have it get robbed and have drugs being dealt out front. This has to be done internally. And I would think that we're better off spending our tax-paying dollars for, instead of building prisons and instead of defunding the police and no cash bail, and which are all reactive, let's spend that money in a better way in these inner cities where everyone participates, everyone's an owner, and let's see if they can create these jobs and police themselves. That's at a bare minimum what I think. And so Donald Trump's presidency, was pretty much a waste of 4 years. Everything that he did was undone by Joe Biden on day one. And this is where I go back and say, Republicans and Democrats, need to stop catering to the far right and the far left. We're never going to get anywhere. And in my previous episode, I said, we need to compromise. And compromise needs to carry the day. And we're not compromising, and we're just going further and further apart. And we're never going to solve these problems and these solutions if we don't compromise. And that's got to come from us, the voters. We have to let our elected officials know that we don't expect to get everything we want. We would rather have 50% of something than 100% of nothing. So both sides are at fault. Michele, I guess I don't know enough about it. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't know enough about it. I never have. There's mixed messages out there that marijuana leads to, harsher drugs, but then there's medicinal uses for it. So I don't really know enough about it to comment. But as I mentioned in the previous podcast, they legalized alcohol, they legalized liquor, then they legalized gambling, then they legalized sports betting, and now they're going to legalize marijuana. And it's just for tax revenues. The politicians are so desperate now that instead of finding ways to, be self-sustaining, they just keep raising taxes and spending more money and trying to solve whatever problems they're trying to solve. And they're not being solved. And at some point, we have to be physically responsible. That was the one thing that I agreed with Donald Trump in being in office, that he was a businessman, and I knew that he would run the country like a business, which he did. But he was controversial. I wished he would have just toned it down a little bit towards the end. I think he would have gotten reelected if he had just toned it down a little bit. But he's a New Yorker. He's a typical New Yorker, and he's loud and he's brash, and you're not going to change him. But I do believe that we have to be better physically responsible. We can't continue on a trillions of dollars worth of a budget. We can't continue that path. And we need to find a way where if we're going to spend, we spend responsibly, and not just coming up with more taxes and taxing more people and coming up with different ways to tax. It's an empty bucket, for some politicians. It's just always going to be. But that's how they get their votes. They're going to promise free things, and if we, we'll give you free stuff if you vote for us. It's not a real good plan, in my opinion. But I don't really have an opinion on the mayor. I don't know enough about it, but it's just really now another desperate move for more taxes that will get spent, and then we'll still have problems. Good question, Michele. After Michelle's gay hairdresser testified against you 4 times, do you harbor any resentment towards the LGBTQ community? No, I don't. And I'll tell you why. Whether he was gay or not, I view him as the second worst person that testified at my trials, right behind Barb Thayer. Barb Thayer was the worst, absolute worst. And that's why I'm suing her in my civil suit for what she did. She was spying on me in my own home, and she was willing to do whatever Sue Mulvey wanted her to do and needed to do. As my trials went along, both Barb Thayer and Michelle's hairdresser, and his name escapes me for a minute, but if you look closely, you'll see that as the trials went on and we addressed certain holes in the testimony of Barb Thayer and the gay hairdresser. In the next trial, you'll notice that Sue Mulvey and Jerry Keene had Barb Thayer and the gay hairdresser change their testimony to fit the holes that we were shooting in their testimony on cross-examination. So, and the gay hairdresser was right in on this, just like Barb Thayer was. Whatever they needed, they were willing to give, and they did. So I don't harbor, anything against him as being gay, because Barb Thayer's the worst, and Barb Thayer's this, straight little old, comes across as this little old lady, innocent, grandmother, and she's anything but. So it didn't matter, what gender or, what sexual orientation. It didn't matter. These individuals were willing to do. I believe that Barb Thayer is convinced that I'm guilty and the gay hairdresser is convinced that I'm guilty, but they're only convinced because of what they're being told by Sue Mulvey and Jerry Keene. Sue Mulvey knows better. She knows better. But Barb Thayer and the gay hairdresser only know what they're being told, and they believe it, unfortunately. How are the kids doing? Michele, they're doing great. They've all got good jobs right now. My oldest son, Taylor, has a great job. Kayla has a great job. My daughter, Jenna, has opened up her own business. And my son, Tanner, has got one more year to finish college. And I'm not sure if he's going to do that up at the University of Buffalo or back in town at Binghamton University. I'm not sure just yet where he's going to finish up, but he's got one more year. But they're all doing good. I see him every day. Like I said, I'm babysitting Taylor's dog and Jenna's dog every day. So, and I see Kayla, she's in town. Kayla and I have been playing tennis together, down at the school. And so I haven't seen Tanner in a little bit, but he comes home for birthdays. He's up in Rochester right now. We got a couple more birthdays coming up in May and June, and he'll be home for those. And then he should be home for the summer. But we're all getting along great, and I really appreciate you asking. Things couldn't be any better. Like I said, though, we're all hurting. We're dealing with the situation as best we can. But the damage that's been done to us is permanent. It's never going to go away, and all we can do is just stick together as a family and get through it. And we all have our highs and lows, but as long as we're together, it definitely helps. And we're all living together right now. No one's moved out of town, so it really helps having everybody close by. But thanks for asking. Michaela, why do you think Barb wasn't arrested for perjury when it was so clear she lied? Well, Michaela, if she was testifying for me, she would have been arrested for perjury. But since she testified for Sue Mulvey at Troop C and Jerry Keene, the district attorney, no way she's going to get arrested. And that's why I'm suing her civilly, is because of what you just said right there. She should have been arrested, and a lot of other people should be arrested. I'll tell you what, Sue Mulvey should be arrested. Jerry Keene should be arrested. Steve Anderson should be arrested from Troop C. The Captain Mark Lester should be arrested for what they did. They should be arrested, but they've got complete immunity. They're never going to see the inside of a prison cell, which is what I really want. I want them to get 25 to life, just what I got. I want them to know what it feels like. But none of them are going to see the inside of a prison cell. And even in the civil suit, none of them are going to have to pay for the damages that they've created out of their pocket. It's not going to come from them. So they're going to walk away scot-free. And this is one of the reasons why I'm speaking out. And I'm, they created this situation. I didn't ask to be put in this situation. They created it. And now my name and my kid's name were literally all across the globe, via 48 Hours, Dateline, 2020, People Magazine, Crime Watch Daily, and all of these other, investigative discoveries, all these other crime shows. And what's I mentioned this before in a previous episode, they're rerunning my case at least once a month. One of the major networks reruns my case on cable at least once a month. And I either catch it myself as I'm channel surfing, or I'll have someone reach out to me on my social media. In the last 6 months, I've had a woman reach out to